Well, hello and welcome back to Rare Classic Cars on this beautiful May day. Today we are going to talk about my 71 Pontiac Grand Ville, the unique features, quirks, idiosyncrasies, and everything else. You may have seen this car if you're a fan of this channel. I just got it back out. And, it's not the prettiest girl at the dance, but it's a good-looking vehicle, I think. And my friend Jim does not like the sandalwood exterior, but he calls it pus beige. But I think in the sunlight, it looks pretty good. Especially, this is not a metallic paint job, but you can see the beautiful highlights that are coming out on the hood here, from the shoulder and then the surface there. Actually, a designer by the name of George Camp did a sketch for the 72 Pontiac, and it's a great sketch. Maybe the execution wasn't all that great. One of the things that people don't know about this is that there was only one Pontiac exterior studio at the time. There was an exterior studio and an interior studio. So the same gentleman who was in charge of the designs for the Pontiac GTO was doing these cars as well. So that was Bill Porter. Bill Porter was the head of Pontiac styling from, I think, about the late 1960s and then for many years into the 1970s. So he's famous for working on the 68, 69, 70 GTO, the 70.5 Firebird. He would later go to Buick Studio and execute a lot of cars there, including the 1995 Riviera that he did with Eric Clough and Andy Hansel. So, very talented designer, but this, some people would say, is a face that only a mother could love. Now, I think it's pretty handsome. One of the things that people don't know about this is this front part here is actually sheet molded compound. This is not metal. So GM, during this time frame, a lot of the front ends for the 71 to 76 cars were not made out of metal. They were made out of that sheet molded compound. And I think that allowed them to make these relatively complicated shapes pretty easily. I mean, this surface here, this twisting and turning as it goes down, is pretty gosh darn complicated. And then, of course, you have that. You've got this crease in the middle of the hood. And the Pontiac has a trapped hood design, a so-called trapped hood, because on each of these sides, it's trapped. The Cadillacs would have the hood that went all the way to the edge and then kind of fold over. Cadillac, interestingly, had the cheapest technique for manufacturing on these hoods. Pontiac had a more expensive technique. But I love all of these creases and how they just gradually fade out into the hood line. And this was a very typical kind of front end format that you would have during the time, with these high fender tops and then the so-called catwalk area in between the high fender peak and then this shoulder here. A lot of cars had that theme, but this one I think looks really unique because you have those creases above the headlamps. It just looks great in the sunlight. The grille, unfortunately, is plastic by this point as well. GM, even the Cadillac, the Eldorado, was a plastic grille. So starting to get a little cheap, as some of the GMs would be of this era, but oh well. The 71s also have this mirror that has the shiny backing, and that was something that would go away, I believe, for 1972, and you can see why. I mean, if you're sitting in a light and the sunlight is coming in here, it's going to reflect it into the eyes of the driver who's opposing this car. You will notice in the windshield, this is the original windshield, and it has the antenna that runs up and then over. You can't see it with the tinted glass here all that well, but it runs up to about right there. And that was something that came out in the 1969 Grand Prix and then proliferated across the General Motors lineup. Some people loved it, some people hated it. It certainly was a clean look, but it didn't get quite as good a radio reception, although I never have any issue with this car and the radio. Now, one thing I will point out about the Granville for this model year is that for 1971 and 72, it would ride atop a 126-inch wheelbase, the same wheelbase as the Olds 98 and Buick Electra, and in fact, it would have this formal style C-pillar that was really borrowed. This roof line was borrowed from them. All the cars shared the same back glass, front glass, A-pillar, windshield, roof on this 126-inch wheelbase. And the Granville would only be on this 126-inch wheelbase just for a few model years, 1971 and 1972. Of course, the Granville would last through the 1975 model year, and then it would be dropped and be replaced by the Bonneville Brougham at the top of the lineup. One could say, well, why did Pontiac come up with the Granville in the first place? And what in the world is Granville? So, what is this? Well, it's a kind of a mix of Grand Prix and then the Bonneville. So a sportier vehicle, I guess. But in any case, one thing that drives me a little nuts is in French, la ville is the French term for the city, V-I-L-L-E, and that's feminine. So this Grand should have an E at the end, and it's not even technically correct to say Granville. It should really be the inverse of that. So they were trying to, like I said, it was supposed to be a hybrid of Grand Prix and Bonneville. But why did Pontiac come out with this car? Well, they knew that the performance era was dead. Emission standards were really coming into play during this time frame, and Pontiac leadership knew that that was going to kill performance. So they actually made a concerted effort to change into the direction, as I was mentioning, of more luxurious vehicles. And the Granville was really the start of that. There was a luxury Le Mans that came out in 1972. Who would think that the Pontiac Le Mans, the car that was really the sporty intermediate, would have a luxury variant with a fender skirt and everything? But that's what they did. And that was why, because like I said, the division management knew that the performance era was potentially over, and so they wanted to do something different. And luxury made money, and Pontiac was very profitable during these years. This was still kind of the waning DeLorean era before he would move to Chevrolet. He did move to Chevrolet by the time this car was out, but not when it was being developed. You notice the hidden wipers here, very typical for GM during this time frame and other automakers. It's a very clean look, but you get the snow in the Midwest kind of packing under here as the wipers sweep and then move back down. So oftentimes on these old cars, you actually see this driver's side one sit up a little bit compared to the passenger wiper because it's out of adjustment, since this wiper is wiping the snow over here, and then this blade will kind of pack it down in that direction, especially when you park the wipers. So yeah, a good look. Works well in the rain, but not something that's all that great otherwise. Notice this car has no passenger mirror, outside rear view mirror. That was pretty typical for the time frame, and you don't need it. Look at how much glass area you have. I never missed the passenger mirror in this car, I have to be honest. You just look around you. There were no four-door for the Granville. The Granville was only a four-door hardtop. Same with like the Olds 98 and the Buick Electra. On the lesser cars like the Catalina, you could get the pillared sedan, but the Granville, you just got the four-door hardtop, and a beautiful hardtop it is. Hardtop, by the way, some people get confused. It just means no B-pillar. Technically, a sedan is a car with a B-pillar. So hardtop could be a two-door, a four-door. This is a four-door hardtop, and this is my favorite body style just because you have this open, totally open cabin here. One other little strange thing, trivia bit, notice this little edge of the glass that's poking out here. This glass, as it comes down, kind of drops this way. And all these four-door hardtops from GM during this era have this little stub of glass. There's just not enough room, I guess, for the glass to go down into the door, probably because of the barreled side. You have this beautiful bone line here, by the way. My friend Dave Rand would like, I think that's appropriate. Dave can comment. But by this point, it's a bone line, and then as you come here, it's still that, but it's this surface kind of picks up out of nowhere to form the leading edge of the fender, and then just beautifully drops down. See how it has that lead-in, kind of rises there, that gentle rise. Something that Ford really didn't do much of. They would always have this perfectly flat fender profile in the Gene Bourdonnais era, probably best exemplified by that late 80s town car or the Mark VI. And here, you've got this nice arc to it, kind of up and down, and then the same in the quarter. Bill Porter was somebody who would really sweat the details on these lines and move lines a half an inch, a quarter of an inch, up and down and all around. Out back you have the vents, the louvered vents for the trunk. And this was a one-year only thing for GM. on these full-size cars, having these vent louvers. This is a later 1971 car because it has fewer louvers. It only has 5 of them in a row here. The earlier ones I think had 8 or 9. But they found that pine needles and crap and debris was getting in here in between the trunk outer panel and the inner panel and rotting it out. Water would get trapped in there if you go through the car wash, and then it would basically seal the trunk shut if it were cold. And yes, people in the South don't know, but you do go through car washes in the Midwest when it's below freezing outside because they're heated, and your car looks like crap because of all the salt on the roads. But those were supposed to drain here, and I think the rubber durometer on these little flaps, see the little holes there? It's pretty strong, so it kind of trap water in here, and then usually these trunk lids would rot out. This one thankfully is in nice shape. No rust on this. You can see the other drain here. So that's where the water's supposed to come up, but that would obviously drain out down here and then it would seal the trunk shut. So that didn't work very well. These do have a really funny little light on them. It rides on the trunk hinge. You see that? And there's a little metal piece in here that rotates and then makes contact with the light. I always thought that was kind of a crappy design, but yeah, I suppose it works. This car did have a CB radio originally. Well, not from the factory, somebody had put it in. But big trunk. And this was how the idea was the ventilation was supposed to flow through the back seat and then kind of go through these little foam pads and out there. These cars have a fan that runs continuously even if you have the climate control off. The fan is always on the low speed, which is kind of annoying, I have to admit sometimes, but it is what it is. GM really did try to have these cars be quite quiet at speed, and I think they did a great job. The ceiling on this car is great. The glass is quite flush, especially the side glass as I put it up. By the way, let's take a look at that motion for the rear window so you can see what I was talking about. Here we are. See how it kind of rotates up and kind of pivots forward. Then the window over here, the front window, you notice how it starts out really close to the A-pillar, then it moves rearward at the top of its travel. And let's see, we'll raise this one. So it stays away, it's kind of genius, it's staying away from the glass so the seal doesn't wear out, and then it pushes against it. This, by the way, is the optional interior in these Granvilles because he couldn't have standard luxury. Beautifully done, wonderful cloth here pattern. This one has the split bench seat and this kind of Hanes underwear style material up here, and then of course vinyl. Interestingly, there's all different colors of beige vinyl in this car. I know it's hard to say. It's kind of tough to tell in the sunlight, but the top piece of vinyl in that armrest is a different color from the sides. The sides are a little bit darker than the top. And then the top of the door pad here, this vinyl is a different color from this. This is lighter. Why the designers spec'd so many different colors of vinyl, I have no idea, but they did. By the way, if anybody knows where to get these these armrests for your GM car, I obviously have a little chip out of this one. The others are in good shape, but let me know. Can't really find one. I'd like to fix that because otherwise the interior in this car is in really nice shape. This is the first year for this particular design, Pontiac 3-spoke wheel. Later it gets some faux wood trim on it and look, I think, a little bit better. Interestingly, the turn signal here is really close to the steering wheel. It's almost too close, so you almost bump it. I mean, it works well, but you come close to bumping it if you're sawing the wheel back and forth pretty fast. But these cars do have really nice power steering. They have GM's variable ratio steering, and when you compare it to the Fords of the era, it's just night and day. This is so much better from a steering perspective. You don't have to turn the wheel nearly as much. The ratio is faster. By the way, when you got the deluxe interior trim, you also got the cigarette lighters in the seat backs, so that you could definitely enjoy your cigarettes anywhere that you wanted, and continue to have your health falter by the assistance of the car. You also did get deluxe pedal trim that had some bright work on it. Now for 1971, all the GM cars except Chevrolet had this kind of driver-centric dash. They would get revised after a couple model years, but they all had this, and the Pontiacs and the others were relatively easy to service. You just take the knobs off of the radio and you can kind of pull this faux burl wood grain back, and you have access to a lot of the lamps and the radio and the climate control panel. You can remove things. This here, if this car had rear defog, or it was a convertible, or it was a station wagon, there would be switches in this panel here. This is just a plug, because it does not have any of those options. This car is quite loaded, has power seats, it has the split bench, it has power windows. By the way, all of this is optional. Tilt wheel, AM/FM radio, air conditioning. The optional, as I mentioned, the deluxe interior, and I'm sure it has other options that I'm even forgetting, but it doesn't have power locks. And I bought this off of the original owner's wife. And I asked her, why did you order all of these options, but you didn't order power locks? And she said, very honestly, well, back then we never locked our car. So I didn't think it was worth paying for. I thought that was a great, honest answer. So the car's got a ton of options, but it has no power locks. You did get, when you got these Grand Villes, you would get the optional kind of interior lighting there. So you get the lights in the bottom of the doors. And, you know, I think overall a nice interior. And like I said, the fabric is really nice. These cars have so many seatbelt buckles. You've got the lap belt that you kind of pull out here, and then you buckle into the small buckle, but then you've got the shoulder belts. And so you've got a ton of buckles all over the place in the front in particular. Notice also you've got a little assist handle in the trim up there. So you've got a little oh shit handle. It's kind of funny. I will say this car, particularly as compared to the Mercury in the garage there, is a good handler for the era. This car doesn't lean, it doesn't wallow. I mean, it's pretty stiff. You kind of push on the fenders here and it immediately stiffens up. GM did a really nice job with the suspension system. Unfortunately, the frame on these is kind of flexy. And the philosophy there was it would flex and help isolate the body from the road shocks and vibrations. A nice interior though. Let's take a look under the hood, and you have the Granville came standard in this year with Pontiac's 455 cubic inch V8. The top engine option was low compression. All General Motors engines had to run on unleaded fuel, and as a consequence, the compression ratios came down from being 10-to-1 or north of that to around the 8-to-1. Still good power though. The horsepower ratings were still being rated in gross horsepower in 1971, but I would say this makes, I put dual exhaust on it, probably 260, 270 net horsepower. It's pretty fast. I would say this car is about an 8-second 0 to 60 car. It came standard with single exhaust, but the Pontiac V8s really open up the horsepower of this era when you put the dual exhaust on them. In fact, in 1973, the Granville, the standard engine with the single exhaust made 215 horsepower. If you put duals on it, it made 250. So you picked up 35 horsepower just by putting dual exhaust on it. And it feels about the same. And this engine's a little stronger than what it was by 73. Notice, by the way, this car has the optional under hood light that winds out. See the cord here? And it comes in here. Well, you can pull this out, and then you can walk around the car, and then the light basically, it's getting a little old these days, but you can just, kind of walk it around the car, and then you twist it, which is a little hard to do, and then the cord winds back up. So pretty cool. So I've wound it a little bit back up here. Of course, the GM A6 style compressor, which I have no idea why, but notice they spelled Firebird as 2 words on there. It was not 2 words, never was, but whomever did the label for that, that is the original label, decided to do that. You have the cruise control system here, I believe the Perfect Circle, Dana Perfect Circle box. Works quite well with the vacuum bellows. By the way, people sometimes wonder, how in the world do you easily change the spark plugs on the passenger side here with this air conditioning compressor in the way? And I will tell you, it's very, very easy if all you do is you jack the car up and remove this right front wheel. This 2 spark plugs in the front are staring right at you. Easiest way to change the spark plugs on this car on the front 2 cylinders for the passenger side. Other than that, not too many other interesting things under hood. This car, there was no overflow bottle in these days. I actually have an overflow bottle from a later Bonneville that I can mount in here. You don't really need it, it just would puke out on the ground. But somebody decided to rig up their own overflow bottle. It looks pretty bad, and I'll probably end up getting rid of that. But it's functional, and so I've kind of left it, despite the fact that it doesn't look that great. So your Pontiac V8 under hood is really a gem. Still the points style setup during this era. But this one fires up really easily. It's cold right now. Oh yeah. Love the sound of a big block in the morning. Yes. Nothing better. And so there you have it, kind of all the cool, strange features, quirks, and idiosyncrasies of the 1971 Pontiac Grand Ville. Oh, I should have said, the driver's side wiper also here is what's called an articulating wiper. So I'll just put it on, and you can see what I mean. Oops, I was trying to turn the key off in time. Give me 1 sec. So notice that this is really a 4-bar linkage on this wiper as compared to that one. It just has the standard wiper. But the purpose of that is to keep that wiper travel really parallel to the A-pillar as it gets to the extreme. Otherwise, it would start rotating. And you saw that on a lot of cars, but with this wide of a windshield, you definitely needed that. So we will retract the wipers here. There we go. And there you have it, the 1971 Pontiac Grand Ville. And notice how flush the glass is over here. Just wonderfully flush, no wind noise, no wind rush. The drip molding is relatively tight to the body. Notice it's tighter to the body up front here, and then it kind of comes out a little bit, presumably for wind noise, to make sure that you don't have wind rush in this area. And these cars are very quiet at speed, 80, 85, miles per hour. Really no wind noise to speak of. We'll just go for a quick little, oh yeah, listen to that Pontiac V8 rumble. Just sounds great. Tons of torque in this thing. No shortage of torque, and good power too. Boy, after a long winter, it feels good to see something other than dead grass and trees without any leaves on them. Actually very pretty right now. Now you're getting to early May in the Midwest. Perfect time, perfect weather, about mid-60s today and sunny. Again, like I said, this car handles amazingly well. Doesn't lean, very pleasant. Let's just accelerate one more time so you can hear the wonderful Pontiac V8. Ready? Oh yeah. Oh, the turbo hydromatic 400 shifts so smoothly. I wish the Ford C6s would shift like that. None of them do. Part of it's that Type F fluid, and part of it's just the shift philosophy. But the Chrysler Torque Flights and the GM turbo hydromatics, oh boy, they're so good. Well, hope you enjoyed this little quick drive and then discussion of this Pontiac Grand Ville. Thanks again for watching.